Okay, so again, good morning. Thank you for joining. My name is Christy Johnson. I am the Peer Support Administrator with the Behavioral Health Division. Today, I am also joined by Jean from Appalachian Consulting. I know a lot of you will probably recognize this wonderful gem as Appalachian has spearheaded most of our peer support trainings in North Dakota. And honestly, they really just helped us get the peer support initiatives in North Dakota rolling. They're fabulous. So our hopes for today are that you all gain kind of like really good insight and knowledge around like not only what the role of a peer support specialist is, but kind of what those ethics and values look like. Our scheduled training time today is roughly 8:30 to 12:30, and we will have a few breaks along the way. Sometimes we do end a little bit early depending on like the Q&A at the end. We do kind of have a large group today, but we do want to make this as personal as an experience as possible for you guys, right? So like we love questions. You guys are more than welcome to utilize the chat. We do have a large group. So with that, we still kind of just want to be mindful of everybody's time, the trainer's time. And, I know you guys all have other things you got to do today and people we work with and so on. So we do have a few options for interaction during today's training. And again, one of them is the chat box where we encourage you to utilize communication between yourselves, ask questions, you name it. Our team will be monitoring the chat to assist with those questions. And again, at the end, we are going to open up the floor so you guys can answer any questions. Ask anything that's on your mind, anything you're curious about. Again, we just really want to help you guys kind of understand the ethics and values behind peer support. So aside from Zoom tracking the attendance, at the end of the training, I'm going to enter a survey link into the chat box. Now that link will take you to a Microsoft form where you'll put in your name and you'll answer a few questions. And within about 7 business days, you will get a certificate of attendance from me that also has the CEU information on it. And for those of you that are certified, that carry the North Dakota peer support certification, please hold on to like any CEUs that you've been gathering or that you're going to gather from this training, because you'll use those to attach to your recertification application. And again, if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me. I will also put my email in the chat box. And yeah, so with that said, I am going to go ahead and pass the torch over to Jean, and we will go ahead and get started. And again, thank you everybody for joining.
Yay. Good morning, everyone. It's so great. I see so many familiar faces out there. It's wonderful. I'm really glad that we have such a big group, because ethics is a very big thing. I think that the traditional provider system worries the most about whether we as peers can do our jobs ethically and professionally. And part of the reason for that is that keep in mind that one of the tools that we use is sharing our story. And, that's certainly one of the things that traditional providers have been told not to do. So we're going to talk today. I think most of us have some familiarity about what ethics are. What we're going to talk about today is what are those slippery slopes that can lead us to not being ethical. Most of you guys can have the handouts. I also have it on PowerPoint here. I'm trying not to make this death by PowerPoint today, you guys. So I do appreciate your input. Like Christy said, we have a lot of folks here, but some interaction is definitely encouraged. So let me see about advancing my screen. Somebody in the chat says their chat isn't showing. Does anybody see how that works? Can best explain to them? So let's start off with, this session will not make you more ethical. Your thinking, decision-making, and actions are what make you ethical. This training is designed to help you examine some of the moving parts that play a role when making ethical decisions. I often say that ethics are the one thing of all the things that computers can do is that you cannot teach computers to make ethical decisions, because there are far too many moving parts. And any one of you that says that you are absolutely 100% ethical is lying to yourself. because there are so many moving pieces. And let's talk about some of those examples. So, two lies in effect. Coworkers A and B go out to lunch together. Which of the following really happened? They spent the entire lunch discussing a person they both served. Coworker A wrote a case note on coworker B about the lunch. Coworker A orders a beer with lunch. Which of those do you think really happened? I think Jason said all of them. Number 3, somebody says, I'm certainly, as what Jason emphasized, that all of them could have happened. But in this particular scenario, the one that really happened was coworker A wrote a case note about coworker B. And part of the thing that leads to that kind of ethical violation is that y'all are under a lot of pressure to make sure you're getting your service units in and stuff like that. I will tell you, coworker B was very upset about this. The next example, it is after agency hours. Peer lets the peer specialist know that they ran out of their meds. How did the peer specialist handle it? Number 1, the peer specialist yells at the person for not getting them filled. The peer specialist has the same meds and dose and gives the person some. And number 3, the peer specialist Googles the psychiatrist's home phone number and calls him. Which one of those do you think really happened? Jeremy says number 3. The one that really happened was number 2, is the peer specialist has the same meds and dose and gives the person some. Now, was that, Allison says, I hope none. Now, was that peer specialist being evil when they did that? No. The issue is they didn't understand that our role as a peer specialist has its own additional responsibilities. Now, I'm not saying that it would be a good thing to do, but I could see where you would do that with a friend. But absolutely not something you should do as a peer specialist. The next one, a peer specialist goes to court with a peer for their preliminary hearing in order to provide support. Which of the following really happened? The peer specialist tells the court that the individual has been going to meetings, and they're not. The peer specialist informs the prosecuting attorney of the person's diagnosis, and the peer specialist agrees to be interviewed by the newspaper about the person. Which of those really happened? We have, somebody says 1 and 2. Diane, you are correct. It was number 3. The peer specialist was interviewed by the newspaper about the person. This was actually one of my employees. And, you know, she really thought that she was doing something really well, I think ego was involved. She was kind of excited that the newspaper wanted to interview her. But I think in her own mind, she really thought that she was helping to advocate for that person. And understanding that that was not her place in this situation. And I just want to highlight that all of these ethical violations, the people were not trying to be evil. Most often, our ethical violations happen because we're trying to help. And sometimes when we get so wrapped up in trying to help, we miss that our responsibility is to support. You know, our job is not to save that person. Our job is to support that person. And, you know, with that, I will tell you that particular employee was fired for that incident. But the difference between ethics policies and laws is she was able to collect unemployment. Unemployment felt like she should have received some sort of warning about it. Ethically, I did not feel that she did. So understanding that laws and policies and your own personal values are all different than what ethics are, and part of what makes it complicated. So should I have not fired her for that? What do you think? Anybody? Yes, fired her. No, shouldn't have fired her.
You possibly could have a sit down with her and explained the policy associated with that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. That's a really good answer, because that is what we did. And really the bottom line to why she was fired for it was because she didn't take responsibility. And that is also true, because you guys will all make ethical violations. But if you find yourself justifying those ethical violations, yeah, you're not learning from it. And that was why she really got fired more for that. If she had taken responsibility and recognized that why that was an ethical violation, it might have been different. So thank you for that, Elliot. So let's talk about what are some reasons that people behave in an unethical manner. Most of us, 98% of us, 1% of us would make an unethical choice if it would in any way benefit us. And 1% of us would avoid making an unethical decision at any cost. But most often when we make unethical decisions, it's because we rationalize it. The biggest driver of dishonesty is the ability to rationalize our actions so that we don't lose the sense of ourselves as good people. And that was the situation with that woman, is that I think partly she was embarrassed, but she could not believe that she would do an unethical thing to somebody. So she rationalized it, that I was just trying to help. I was just trying to help. The next one, psychological distance. Our willingness to be unethical increases as we gain psychological distance from the action. It is okay to take a pencil from work because it doesn't hurt anyone. It's okay to give that person $5 because no one will know about it and they really need it anyway. They really, even Diane says, saving face. You can't save your face and your A at the same time. I like that. And we cheat more when it's for other people. People are able to be unethical more when they do it for other people. I was trying to help. And I think that is the hole that a lot of times as peers can be a slippery slope for us, is that our whole desire is to help people. We don't want to see people in pain. We don't want to see people going through those struggles that we went through. And one dishonest thing leads to another. Once you behave badly, at some point, you stop thinking about yourself as a good person. At that level, you say, it's no big deal. That once you start down that slippery slope, it makes it easier to make that unethical decision next time. Not sure if Cindy was trying to say something there. So let's talk about, what does research say about our ethics? I found this to be really fascinating. True or false? Most adults have a solid, well-formed ethical belief that can be changed only by new evidence or a reasoned argument. What do you think? True or false? True, false. A couple of trues, a couple of falses. We like to think that our ethics are well grounded and nobody is going to shift me from these ethical beliefs, but it's false. Most people's ethical judgments are easily manipulated by simply changing the contextual factors, by telling them that their boss has a certain view, that their peers have a certain view, or even just by spraying the room in which they make the decision with fart spray. Yes, there is such a thing. Psychologists can alter people's ethical judgments because people generally do not realize how easily their ethical judgments are manipulated. They are prone to making poor ethical choices. And again, the thing I really want to stress with you guys today is that ethics isn't something that, oh, you figure out and you put on a shelf. It's something you need to be thinking about every day with every encounter. Next one. I love this one. I am more ethical than my peers. How many of you think that you are more ethical than your peers? Jason is honest and says no. And I'll tell you, Jason, is that I will tell you, because you said no to that probably makes you more ethical than most, because you are aware of that slippery slope. Elliot says, doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. Could that be unethical? It sounds great. But could that lead to an ethical violation? You know, that example earlier with the woman who gave her one of her meds, she felt like she was doing the right thing. She did not want that person to go through withdrawals from missing their meds tonight. She was doing it for the right reasons to help the person. She really thought she was doing the right thing. Calvin says, this is a great observation too. Right is not always correct. You know, there's that famous example of, you know, the speeding train is coming down the tracks, and you can flip the switch and save the 8 people standing on the tracks, but you'll crash the train and kill everybody on the train. Which one do you choose? Or the other one I like is that if I kill this person, I can probably save 8 people with their organs. Should I do it? I'll save 8 people. Those 8 people will die if I don't. You see how tricky ethics become. It's not just the easy answer. The computer would say, yes, kill that person, but they're computers, so. So am I more ethical than my peers? You may be more ethical than your peers, but 85% or so of Americans also believe that they are, and that is simply not mathematically possible. This is the fact that 92% of Americans are satisfied with their moral character. The overconfidence bias shows that most of us tend to be overconfident in our morality, which can lead us to make ethical decisions without being sufficiently reflective. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about with this, is that if you think that your ethical grounds are solid 100% of the time, then you're not being reflective. Is that you're being reactive. And quite honestly, you're checking off a box. And that's not what ethics are. The next one. John is the captain of a submarine. An explosion has caused the sub to lose most of its oxygen supply and has injured a crew member who is bleeding badly and is going to die from his wound, no matter what happens. The remaining oxygen is not sufficient for the entire crew to make it to the surface. The only way to save the other crew members is for John to shoot dead the injured crewman now. Then there will be just enough oxygen for the rest of the crew to survive. Is it morally acceptable for John to shoot the injured crewman? No, somebody says no, no. What's interesting about this scenario is that it's not just the scenario of depends on his orders. There was some vet that said that. I don't know, it slipped by too fast, but I'm convinced that. Are you a vet, Jason? No, that definitely sounded like a veteran answer. Part of the dilemma with this one is it includes two things. One, am I going to save the rest of the crew members? And I think one of our most difficult moral questions is, could I take a life? And I think that's one of the big struggles that a lot of veterans with PTSD have, is that they are coming back from their military service having, violated their own. It's called moral injury. Not taking a life is one of our strongest. I think most everybody here would say that that's an important moral foundation. So the answer, I lost it, hang on. There is no incontestably right answer. And that is one of the things that often really sucks about ethics. But by giving subjects brain teasers that tempted them to quickly choose obvious answers that turned out to be wrong, psychologists prompted them to be more thoughtful in answering this question. When they did, subjects tended to answer yes at a meaningfully higher rate than did people who answered with their gut. When people answer ethical questions spontaneously, they tend to be more rule-based in their responses. Thou shalt not kill. With more reflection, they tend to take a more utilitarian, consequence-based approach, taking one life to save many. Again, making sure that when you are making these ethical decisions, that it's not just a snap decision. Ethics are not just go with your gut. Quite frankly, oftentimes making good ethical decisions sucks. Good ethical decisions can oftentimes give you a sour feeling in your gut. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the wrong thing. Next one. Sally is a tourist in New York City. Late at night, she is confronted by a vicious mugger on the side street. Sally starts screaming for help. Sally is better off if there are 20 bystanders close by rather than one. What do you think? Is she better if there's more people around or fewer people around? We have a false, not necessarily false, fewer. True. Bystander effect. Thank you, Calvin. Yes. Because of the bystander effect, the tendency of people to take their behavioral cues from those around them. Sally may be better off with only one person nearby, because that person will know that unless he or she helps, Sally will be in big trouble. If there are many people around, they may all look to each other to see what to do. If no one takes the lead, they may all end up doing nothing. And I think that's often true as well, is that we wait for somebody else to tell us what we should do. Donna says, Allison says sad, and Donna says bystander apathy. It's not that those 20 people don't care. It's just they think somebody else will do it. And that is the same thing is true for us as peer specialists when we see other people behaving unethically. Part of our ethical foundation needs to be that we have to call those people out. And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do if you know your coworker is behaving unethically. But it is a part of our job because it does reflect on our profession. Understanding that peer support is a profession. And anytime that people make those ethical violations, it reflects on all of us. And I think that's what worries me the most, is that how it reflects on the rest of us. True or false? You were in a job interview and an interviewer started asking you sexually inappropriate questions. Would you stand up and walk out of the interview? I love all the yeses, and Kelly says depends, maybe. Let me tell you what the research says. Probably anyway. In one study, when a group of young women were asked individually what they would do in this situation, virtually everyone predicted that she would walk out of the interview or protest in some other fashion. But when other young women were actually put into what they thought was a real job interview, not a single one protested. They all wanted the job so much that the ethicality of the situation just faded away. There's a video on that Ethics Unwrapped is a website that you can go to that has a lot of this information on this these ethics studies. The Ethics Unwrapped video on framing illustrates that the kinds of ethical decisions you are likely to make have a lot to do with how you look at the issue. For example, if you see it as an ethical issue, you will tend to make different and more ethical decisions than if you look at it simply as a business decision. And I think that's also one of the struggles for peer specialists. I have a friend that recently, he's been working for an agency for quite a long period of time, that he's really hated his job because the agency was doing a lot of unethical things. And it is also our responsibility ethically that if we see agency policies that are unethical, to bring it to their awareness. And he tried that and it didn't work, so he ended up quitting his job. Now, I will say to you that if you work for an agency that you don't believe is behaving ethically and you think they should do something different, don't just go do something different. You can work to change the policy. You can find another job. If it's the policy of the agency, it is also our ethical responsibility to follow the policies of the agency. If you feel like it's something that violates your ethics or if it violates your peer ethics, work to change it. Think about it. Most agencies before peer support had policies about people sharing their lived experience, sharing their story. Policies had to change. And one of our roles as peer specialists is we have the experience of what it's like to sit in those waiting rooms. Most of the providers have never sat in those waiting rooms. And so some of those things that they are doing, those policies and procedures and stuff that may seem to violate ethics are not because they're being evil. It's because they're not aware. For example, a number of residential programs have bedtimes for people. Do they do that because they're mean and controlling? And no, it's just easier to know everybody's in the bed at the same time. So it is a part of our ethical obligation to bring that awareness to the provider system. That's one of our roles. That's one of the reasons we're here. Next up. You are driving and come across a terrible collision between two cars that just happened. Both cars are on fire and will soon be consumed with flames, killing the occupants. You realize with horror that your brother is unconscious in one of the cars, while two strangers are unconscious in the other. You have time to save the occupants of only one of the cars. The moral thing for you to do is save the two strangers. What do you really do? What do you really do? Calvin says, I'm not sure which brother. That's brilliant. And Stephanie says, save my brother, sadly. That's the other thing to keep in mind is how our emotions play into our ethical decisions. So again, it says there's no incontestably correct answer here. Most people believe that the right thing to do is save your brother, even though two people will die instead of one. Many psychologists believe there are a tendency to favor in-group members, friends and family. In this way is evolutionarily based, and helped our ancestors improve the chances of their genes would be passed down. There's quite a bit of evidence that our moral sense evolved to help us live together cooperatively in groups. Jeffrey says, save the one you're able to. Danielle says, disassociate yourself from the situation personally. It's understanding that I think most of us want to believe that we could. But in the situation, it is so difficult. It's so difficult to eliminate some of that emotional contamination that's going to be there. And part of it is acknowledging that I'm going to have an emotional reaction to wanting to save the person I know as opposed to the strangers. And you've got to include that in the scenario and the decision making. So it says, don't panic if you didn't correctly answer all 6 questions. Professor Pretton says we all tend to overestimate our ability to act ethically. And the good news is that by studying ethics that anyone, anywhere can use for free will help you find ethical bearings. The big picture is that everybody tends to think of themselves as good people with the confidence they'll make ethical decisions, but we aren't realistic about the pressures we face. The best way for us to prepare to explain how hard it will be to live up to our own standards. And that's why I'm so glad that everybody's here today, because everybody here is wanting to think deeper about ethics. It's not simply having a 10-point ethical code of conduct, because everything cannot be included in that ethical code of conduct. And it does vary by situation, but recognizing that we're all more unethical than we would like to believe will help you think through how to make ethical decisions. George, this is a great one. George watches as Paul's wheelchair fails to stop and continues to roll onto the tracks. George would do something, but knows he's not allowed to pass the yellow line. Great work, George. Simply following the rules does not make us ethical. So again, let's dig a little bit more into some of the common conditions that invite ethical violations. The bad apple. Any profession or discipline can have a person who is self-serving, a person who disregards ethics and intentionally commits misconduct. These people will eventually lose their jobs, but the effects on the individuals they serve and the profession will be long-lasting. We tend to think that those are the people, those bad people are the only ones that violate ethics. And to be honest with you, that is the smallest population of folks that do. But, you know, as you know, those are the people that make it on the news. Those are the people that, you know, there's a big deal, they get fired. And, you know, there is, and again, going back to that, how it reflects on the profession. Many years ago here in Lansing, well, in Michigan, one of our peer-run centers, the director of the center embezzled $2,000. Oh my God. You know, they were going to shut down the place, you know, eliminate the program, all this kinds of stuff, over $2,000. Also, here in Lansing, the woman that was the financial director of our local United Way was found to have embezzled $3 million to fund her horse farm. Did they come in and say, we're going to shut down United Way? No. I do think that when we have those bad apples as peer support specialists, it gets highlighted in a far different way. So it is hugely important for us not just to not be the bad apple, but all of you know a bad apple. Have you called them out? That's a part of our responsibility too, because it reflects on us. I'll tell you, part of my day job is we do technical support for peer-run agencies, and we had to do a lot of work after what that person did. The bad apple doesn't always know it's bruised. And that's a really good point too. Going back to that example of the woman who gave her meds to that woman, she did not know she was being a bad apple. She wasn't doing it to be self-serving or anything like that. But she didn't know. And that's our job. That's what being ethical is thinking through all the moving parts. The next one, stressful conditions. Sometimes the environment we work in can pressure us into straying from our ethical foundation. The pressure, priorities, and needs of our job can cause us to use the easy button, which generally does not support ethical decisions. I think oftentimes that is the situation we find ourselves in, is that, whether it be the caseload's too big, whether it's, going back to that example of the woman that did the progress note on her friend at lunch, is that, again, she wasn't trying to be evil. She was in a stressful condition. She has, a certain productivity, which kind of creeps me out that they call services productivity. But she had a certain productivity level that she had to reach, and that caused those stressful conditions. Another ethical situation that as peers we fall into sometimes is when we should on people. It's easier to tell people what they should do than the long process of helping them figure out what they should do. We know it doesn't work, but it's easier to do. That a lot of times we do it because it's easier. When you fill out that form for that person, instead of supporting them to fill it out for themselves, you're not empowering that person, and it's an ethical violation, but it's the easy button. Treatment plans where, the agency develops the goals in someone's treatment plan. They don't do it because it's evil. They do it because it's easy. So also understanding that good ethical decisions sometimes make more work. The next situation is incomplete information. Most ethical violations don't happen out of evil intent. They often happen out of compassion that does not take into account the full picture. We often make decisions without thinking through the full impact of our decision or action. And I think that's one of the things that's, for good and for bad, a unique struggle that we have as peers, is that we have that lived experience, we have that shared experience, which makes it easier for us to empathize with the individual, but it also makes it a slippery slope. Clinicians have that, nice little shield of understanding what those boundaries are. It's a little trickier for peers. It's a little trickier for peers understanding that our job is to not be a person's friend. You may have heard me say our job is to be friend-like with a purpose. Clinicians have, it's an easy boundary when clinicians are told that, well, you can't share your lived experience. It's an easy thing to hide behind. We sometimes are differently emotionally attached with the individuals we serve because we see ourselves in the individuals we serve. That also makes it a slippery slope for ethical violations. So anybody have any experience with any of these common conditions, the bad apple, stressful conditions, incomplete information? You can raise your hand to talk if you'd like.
Miss Elliott,
Yeah.
my challenge lately, because I've been with the program since it started, and welcome back to North Dakota, by the way. is I'm getting calls from people who we've discharged from Free Through Recovery. And they're hurting, and they reach out to me because they're the only person who will listen to them. And they want help, but they're not in the program. And they may be off paper, and I can't get to them. And I can't ethically do anything for them, correct, until they're in Community Connect or whatever. But the relationship has the relationship has continued, but my professional relationship has ended. And I ran into this, of course, as a counselor in Minnesota, and there was no real, should I say, dynamics about that, because most people that left inpatient I never saw again. But these folks in this special population are popping up again, and so. You know, I really have to stand my distance, and I'm wondering how you would approach that.
Yeah, that's a great observation too, about how sometimes those, just the system itself, because of the eligibility requirements, any of those kinds of things, can put us in those ethical dilemma situations, you know.
Jean, Heather had something to share as well, too.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, I haven't really talked yet this morning. I just wanted to say that, you know, from my opinion, ethically, that if somebody reaches out to me who is a former participant in one of our programs looking for help, I'm still going to be helping them and connecting them to resources unless something in my agency policies makes that impossible for me. And most agency policies state that, you know, personally, you can't have a relationship with that client after discharge, but most don't say, you know, professionally. So if that person's reaching out to you professionally, wanting help, I'm going to do everything I can do to connect them to those resources. And then even following up with them, unless, like I said, there's an agency policy that prohibits that, but most don't, in my experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that whether it's in this type of situation, or maybe somebody needs something that your agency doesn't provide, is it is our responsibility to help them connect with the resources that are out there. Was that helpful, Elliot?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And the other thing that to be careful with that sometimes can come up is that, and I don't think people are being evil about it, is that I have heard peers say, and I'm not saying this is your situation, Elliot, but my people need me. Let your people go. Is that if it is an ethical violation, if you think you are the only one that can provide the services that person needs. You know, you might, and you know, I know we all have trust issues sometimes when we refer people out to other agencies or other services. But understanding that's about us, not about the services or what that individual needs. So keeping those things in mind too. Anybody else experience any of those common conditions? Anybody? See, this is my worry.
I can share a little something real quick, Jean.
Yeah.
When I started recovery coaching a few years ago on the Minnesota side, it was really neat to, like, you know, sometimes like people would, like, you know, they build a really good relationship with someone, but at the same time, we want to balance that with making sure that we're helping that person build like their independent skills, right? Like making sure that they can, you know, learn how to do these things on their own so they're not so dependent on us, and helping them, you know, build their wings and spread their wings and stuff like that.
Yeah, and two things with that. One, the other one is that sometimes the individual will want you to, because they have their own self-doubt, will want you to do it for them. You know, going back to that example of, you know, even filling out a form for somebody is that, you know, I would talk to somebody, what do you think is going to be the challenge for you filling out the form? Personally, I don't spell very well. So to handwrite a form just stresses me out. You know, so you know what kind of, most of the time, I really bothers me when I hear people say, I'm not going to do something for somebody that they could do for themselves, or I'm not working their recovery harder than they are. It's not stepping back and recognizing that there's some sort of self-talk going on for that person. Somebody put in the chat about, you know, how the work day, just the schedule you have for the work day, can cause you to make those ethical shortcuts. And I think that even falls into this one with the filling out the forms, is that, you know, do you guys have time to fill out forms for everybody? No. You know, and so sometimes we make those shortcut ethical decisions because of our workflow. Most clinicians spend, I think they say statistically, clinicians spend 70% of the time in the record, 70% of their time on paperwork. None of them got into this business to do that. So that's going to make some ethical challenges in providing services. Calvin says that things are always changing at the agency, so sometimes it's hard to keep up on things. I was doing an ethics training in Ohio, and the executive director of the agency was in the room. And we were talking about agency policies, and, you know, there's the written policies and the unwritten policies, and then there's the ethics on top of that. And this guy is the executive director. He's been the executive director for a number of years. And I asked him, do you know all the policies of the agency? And he said, no. Because that's going to be true for all of you too, is that it's going to be important to know what the policies of your agency are. It's going to be important to know what some of the written ones and unwritten ones are. But understanding, like Calvin said, is that they are always evolving. I mean, dear Lord, just look at all the new policies changes that came out with COVID, for God's sakes. You know, that flipped everything on end. So they are going to be something that's changing and evolving. Anybody else on those three conditions? Now think about when you've seen people make ethical violations, which of those three categories are the ones that stand out the most to you? The bad apples, stressful conditions, or incomplete information. Which one do you think you've observed the most?
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you repeat all three again, Jean?
The bad apple, stressful conditions, and incomplete information. Which one of those do you think is the biggest condition for you?
Not or
Stressful-
having. Hey, Jean.
Yeah. Hey.
I want to say having a lot of staff and not getting the complete information on somebody or a situation, and then you got 8 to 10 different scenarios of what just happened because everybody's interpretation of this what just escalated from 0 to 100. Maybe some bad decisions in there too also.
Yeah, that's a great observation too, is that sometimes that even when you're trying to fill in that information, sometimes the source of your information is not necessary, has their own contamination. Again, not saying anybody's doing anything evil, but that it has its own contamination, you know? Yeah, I like that. Even when you're trying to and I guarantee every one of you are trying to do everything at the best of your ability. Again, every single one of you will have ethical violations. Your primary responsibility when that happens is to take responsibility for it and figure out what happened. And Tila's example of, oftentimes it is, I made this decision, but I didn't realize there were pieces of the information I was missing, or pieces of the information I was misinformed about. Anybody else, any bad apple, stressful conditions, incomplete information? Jennifer says the bad apple is always there. Absolutely. The bad apple is always there. That tends to be the one we focus on because it's the easiest. I mean, you all would say that a peer specialist, recovery coach, whatever, should not have sex with somebody they serve, right? Sadly, it happens more often than you'd think. But those are the easy ones. Those are the easy ones to call out. It's the stressful conditions and incomplete information that are tough sometimes. Anybody have any personal connections with those bad apple, stressful conditions, incomplete information in your own life? Jeremy says, most often though, if people know better, they do better. So I would say incomplete information. Again, a lot of times that incomplete information is we're making decisions from the gut. And the gut cannot always be trusted. Anybody have one they would share, either from their own struggle or something they've seen? Nobody wants to call out.
Of course I do. Of course I do. Of course I do. I was waiting for the. a
Of
little bit
course
for
you
somebody else
do.
to- I know. Of course I do. I have stuff all day. Working from a small town and living on the reservation, you are related to a lot of people. You are not just as, you know what I mean, as our cultural and in a space like this, and especially the space and the living where you used to be sick. I want to say where you used
Right.
to hustle around, where you used to be in that spot, and people assume stuff, or you see people that are they're getting their life together, but then you see them in that moment of at the gas station and hanging out with those people, and you're like, hey, and maybe they're one of your, you know what I mean, my family members that's telling somebody a way different story, and you see them at night, and there's that moment where you have to step back and figure out kind of which hat do you have on, ethically and family wise, or maybe just that I always call it that peer support heart that we all have, that you want to get out and be like, hey, what's up? What's going on? Or do you want to, jump in with me instead and, do something, and then you don't know if you have that right, or if you're stepping over boundaries. There's just those two pivotal moments where you really got to stop and think, which hat do you really have on right now? But our heart's telling us different than our job ethics and what we should be doing and our healthy boundaries, but it's that heart. It really is. I really feel like that.
Yeah, that's a great observation too, especially, whether you're talking small communities, whether you're talking family members, any of that kind of stuff is that remembering, which hat am I supposed to be wearing, again, I see that there are a lot of ways that we don't necessarily, sometimes, should somebody be somebody's sponsor and their peer specialist? They have two different roles for that person. I like to say, the sponsor's job is to help people through the steps. The peer specialist's job is to help that person figure out how to do those steps. And understanding, and again, like Tila was saying, it's not because you don't care, it's actually because you do care. So how do you manage those? How do you manage when somebody comes in? It'd be easy to just have a policy that you cannot serve anybody you've used with in your life. Yeah, how many of us would be out of work? Exactly. It's an easy to have that policy because it eliminates those ethical dilemmas. But is there a way to ethically serve somebody you use with? What are some things you would have to keep in mind? Anybody? Boundaries. What does boundaries mean? You guys have talked about, what do you think? Well, who would give me a definition of, Kelly says your head at that time. Keep it professional. Now, what is that? Now, that's another one. What does it mean to keep it professional? Does that mean keeping it at arm's distance? Somebody says you could have another person be there with you. I think with that too, we'll talk about that a little bit as well, as about not making ethical decisions in a bubble. Somebody says, I think in that situation, I would want to use my supervisor to discuss the case and determine if I would be the best or if there was another person to offer support. I think that's a great observation, is that, you know, like we talked about in that ethical research, is that we often think that we could make those separations. But having a third party help you think through making those separations is important. You know, oftentimes I will talk about, has the relationship changed? So yes, it is possible, but also you have to be, you can't just say, yes, it's possible, because you have to think through what are the moving parts. How will you know if you talk yourself into doing this? How will you know that if it starts getting a little hinky? What are some questions you'll ask yourself? So let's talk about that. Let me see if I get to the next slide. For some reason. There. Is it ethical? Here's some questions to ask yourself. Is it ethical? Yes. When or why would it be okay? What could the possible effects be? No. When or why would this not be okay? What could be the possible effects? Maybe. What information do you need to do to decide? What factors to use if this is ethical? The who, what, and why. Really, in any situation, thinking through both sides of the scenario. When would it be okay to serve somebody that you used with? When would it not be okay? And also, I love the suggestion about talking it through with your supervisor, talking it through with a third party, because we all know our own thought processes cannot always be trusted. That's part of why we're here, right? So making sure that you use that outside party, because every single situation, you can answer why yes, it would be and why it would not. Elliot says head, heart, and gut will probably tell you something. Yeah, it'll tell you something. Doesn't necessarily always mean it's the right thing. You know, I had a woman in my office, this tiny little blonde woman. She is, I don't know, middle-aged, whatever. She looked like some suburban housewife. And she was homeless. And she didn't trust going to the shelters or anything like that. And I knew she was leaving my office to go sleep in the stairwell of the parking garage. Damn, I wanted to take her home and make sure she was warm tonight. My head, my heart, my gut hurt but the ethical thing to do was to let her go do that. You know, I'll tell you, when she got her own apartment, she sure appreciated it. But sometimes we want to save people from having to experience that pain. But, you know, keep in mind is that the resilience we've all learned by overcoming that in our own lives. You know, she learned what to do to not end up in that situation again. Calvin mentions an accountability partner. That's kind of helpful too, is that if you have somebody whose judgment you just trust, doesn't have to be a friend, doesn't necessarily have to be your supervisor, but just somebody whose judgment you trust to be able to have as a go-to person to ask questions like that. I think that's huge. We have a tendency in those situations to only seek out people that will agree with us. What you really want in that person is someone that will challenge you. You know, challenge you and say, why do you think that's the best decision? You know, yeah, it is very difficult for us, again, when we see people in pain. It can be also sometimes when we can make those unethical decisions. So we've been going for about an hour. How about if we take a break? So cool. All right. I see most everybody's shifted back in because nobody's going to like the next topic we're going to discuss. And that is codependency.
What?
Codependency is a slippery slope to ethical violations and or burnout. Codependency sounds like an icky possibility to think about in relation to the work that we do as peers. But if the relationship is one in which we serve others becomes dysfunctional, it can become codependent. One of the criteria for becoming a peer provider is that we come into the job with our own history of issues. This is the strength of a peer provider. That strength can also be a danger if we're not taking care of our own recovery. If we are finding our identity in our work, it can become a slippery slope. So, how could this lead to ethical violations?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. How could that lead to ethical violations? Anybody? Allison says, I just picked up a 2-year medallion for working on my codependency. And, you know, we talk about that a lot. I think it's another place for those of us as peer providers that we need to be really careful of is that sometimes being a peer can become our new addiction. You know, and when you're doing that, I'm available to people 24/7. You might have some codependency going on. For any of you that printed out the or have the handouts I sent, there's a codependency assessment in there that can be helpful for you to look at and looking at what is your codependency risk. Let me pull that up and we'll talk about a few of those.
What page is it?
It's, hang on, I'm pulling it up. I have too many screens going here. I have all your faces on top of my screen. It's right at the end. It is probably page 13.
12 and 13.
Yeah. So, you know, take a look at some of those questions and how many of those would you say false to? I make enough time to do things for myself every week. I spend a lot of time criticizing myself after an interaction with someone. I would not be embarrassed if people knew I knew certain things about me. Sometimes I feel like I just waste a lot of time and don't get anywhere. For any of you that have that list in front of you, what are some of those that you struggle with? Let's see. I think I can put the, wait, I think I have to close it first, maybe. I think I
Apologize.
can, that's okay. I think I can put the handouts in the chat. Let me try. No, I can't. Drive Zoom. Can you put them in the chat, Christy?
Yes, ma'am.
For anybody that wants to pull them up. So anybody that has them, anything that on that list that stands out to you as one of your slippery slopes?
A lot in here for me.
And
It's
it
just gonna
feels
take me a second to get them in the chat, guys. I gotta put them into a Dropbox thing.
cool. And we don't want to think about being codependent with the people we serve. We don't want to think about that, you know? But again, if you're not building that awareness, then you're not being ethical. I think one of the big challenges we often have as peers is the whole not taking care of ourselves.
That's probably one of my biggest too.
Yeah. And Jason mentioned is that helping as much as a friend instead of a peer because I want to help and overdo it. You know, we want to be that person that wasn't there for us. And we are. Keeping that focus on our responsibilities as a peer specialist, we are being that person. But the trouble is that when we sometimes want to save people from that pain, you know, going back to that lady that was going to go sleep in the stairwell, is that, man, I wanted to, emotionally, I wanted to rent her a hotel room or, you know, something, you know, but that would not have, let me tell you, because she was sleeping outside, she worked her butt off to get her place and to keep her place. You know, we cannot rob people from their lessons either. Anybody else, something on this list that stands out to you that you yourself could work on, or you know of other peers that could work on? Yeah, somebody said taking time for my own mental health. It is important. And, you know, I don't like the term compassion fatigue when we talk about this, because compassion to me sounds like you're blaming the person you serve. You know, we don't really get joy fatigue or anything like that. What we're really talking about is that we're not taking care of ourselves. If you are feeling burned out, it's not the responsibility of your job. It's not the responsibility of the people we serve. It's that we're not taking care of ourselves. And that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be a lot of heavy things that we have to deal with as a part of our job. You know, I think all of us have lost individuals we serve, whether it's lost to drugs, whether it be lost to suicide, whether it be just, you know, lost that they went back to their life, to the life. And that's really painful. But going back to what Jason was saying is that if you know that you did everything that you could as a part of your job, you can't save people. You don't have that power. You don't have that power to save people. That's not our job. Our job is to help them to save themselves. Anybody else have anything on that list? What do you do? Because I think this is a big one for our ethical violations. What do you do in your life to separate work and home? Tila was talking about a lot of times she sees people she serves or people in need of services in the community. How do you make that dividing line? Set boundaries. Yeah, everybody keeps saying set boundaries. What does that mean? What's a good example of boundaries? Because it can get a little tricky, is that, if your boundaries are too tight, that's also an ethical issue. Just as much if your boundaries are too loose.
Can I share a story
Please.
from the last couple of weeks with me? And I may even cry when I talk about this, but because it really shook me. But it's really kind of what we're talking about right now, and that is that I do a lot of peer support groups at our center, and we have a Monday night group that's very tight, and they've developed a bond over a long period of time, and there's some people that come and go. But there's one person in that group that, well, and let me qualify this by saying I don't limit or haven't limited people to always only talking to me during my 9 to 5 hours or whatever, because I know that people aren't always in crisis between 9 and 5.
Mhm.
And so I have made myself available to a point. So I have this gal that has recurrent bouts with very severe depression that's in that Monday night group. And I really try to support, encourage, help her make decisions about how she wants to move forward, things like that, really trying to work it with her. And every once in a while, it's like, okay, I'll climb down in the pit with you in order to help you get out. Well, recently I've climbed down into the pit and with her, and the point where she was suicidal. And I finally said, I have no choice but to call emergency services, because you will not be here tomorrow if I don't do that. And so she refused to let them in, told them to pound sand, all that kind of stuff. But then as soon as they left, tried to engage me again through text and things like that. And it was at that point that I realized what I had done with this gal, because a few weekends ago, I spent probably 14 hours that weekend talking back and forth with her, trying to support, reinforce her and things like that. But what I realized about a week and a half ago with this incident was that I was willing to get down in the pit with her in order to help her find out how to come out of it. She didn't want to come out of the pit. She wanted me to come down in the pit with her all the time and just live in that. And I had done that. And I had become the pressure release valve for her. I would give her enough pressure release to allow her to say, okay, well, I'm not going to go get help now because I'm good for now. I'm good for now. And I realized that that was an ethical thing that I was doing. Even though I was trying very hard to support and help her, I was also being the reason which she was getting away with not seeking the help that she needed. And so that really shook me, because I thought I did the wrong thing with this person, and I didn't, but I did.
Mhm.
And so that to me is something that really stands out when we're talking about this right now.
Yeah, and that whole recognizing that sometimes we help people so much we disable them. And never was that your choice. And my guess is it wasn't that she didn't want help. She was probably too afraid. And you gave her that relief for that little while.
Yeah.
I appreciate you're also, because the other thing I heard in there is you also recognized when the situation was beyond your skill set. And and that doesn't always work out. I mean, you said you called the authorities or whatever, and it doesn't always work out, but you recognized that it was beyond your skill set to manage that.
And I did feel like I have done what I can do.
Mhm.
I have done everything I can do here. So I felt okay about that. It was just in realizing that I had become, tried to take more of a role probably than I should have.
Mhm. And keeping in mind that it's not something you have to do by yourself. That's a lot of responsibility to hang on your shoulders to be the only one for 14 hours. Also with that, and it came up in the chat too, is the whole issue about being mandated reporters and the struggle that is. I have been in situations where I've had to do the mandate report thing, and it really soured my relationship with the person I serve. But sometimes you are in that situation. The person got the help, the person lived. That was the priority.
Well,
She
and a good thing about this is that that was tough, and I thought it was going to sour that relationship, but actually that person now came back yesterday to talk to me a little bit. And because I told her I have to step back from this, I'm here to support you, I'm with you, but I cannot take this role. She is actually re-engaging with a therapist now. So there is a good piece that came from it. A couple of days looked really crappy there.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I think with that, that was really good too. That can help you with that is that you also explained to her what your role was and what your role wasn't. So when we're talking about boundaries, I think it's important to let the people we serve know, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. We talk a lot about it just made me think of issues with confidentiality. When someone comes into me and says, can I tell you something you won't tell anybody? And I always tell them first thing, as long as it's not a danger to self or others. Being upfront about that. And are you risking your peer relationship with that individual? Perhaps. But it's about that person, not about you. A lot of times when we talk about ethics and you ask people, what is the role of ethics? And a lot of times people will say, ethics are important so I don't get jammed up. No, ethics are important so the person you serve doesn't get jammed up. And sometimes that means, Tamara, you sort of had to, quote, risk your relationship with that individual because it was in the best interest of that individual. And sometimes it's hard to do. And even if she had decided to never speak to you again, the struggle with going with your gut and not going with your gut, because your gut probably said when you called, she's going to hate me forever if I call, is what your gut said. Yeah. Anybody else? What are some of the things that are the slippery slope of codependency for you? And again, codependency is not something that we necessarily are aware of. So again, why we're talking about bringing these things to our consciousness. Calvin says sugarcoating. Lots of times that can be a challenge that, if we're just trying to look on the bright side of everything, sometimes we can miss things. I asked earlier, do any of you have a ritual of separating work and home? what is something that helps you separate work from home? I saw a lot of things in the chat that people shut off their phones and stuff like that. But what are some rituals you have to separate? You know, it's hard sometimes, you know, a lot of you might be working, woodworking. I like that, Jason. Thank you. I just started metalworking. Fly kites. Nice. Spend time with my family, babysit my grand. I love that. You know, you got to have something that a lot of times folks, they're working all day as a peer. You know, they come home, they go to meeting, they're doing all recovery stuff at meeting, then they hang out with all their 12-step friends. And, you know, when are you doing something that's just for you, just beyond, you know, all of that stuff that we have to deal with every day? This woman told me that she has a ritual I thought was really cool. It's a door handle ritual. That she has this whole ritual that she does when she touches the door handle. And I don't know if it's her house door or office door, I don't know. But that for her, it's an on-off switch. That when she grabs that doorknob, is that she's shutting off that side. Now, none of us are going to be perfect about it. You know, I'm not going to tell you that when I came home from work that day with that woman that was sleeping in the stairwell, that I didn't worry about her all night, because I did. And was so glad when I saw her the next morning. But how to not let that overcome. Holly says, Tuesday night dinner with my hubby and friends. It's kind of funny. I have a group of people that come over here on Sundays and we do dinner and play cards. And one of them's the therapist. One of them's a minister. I do peer support. And we really we don't talk work. We just laugh. We just have fun and laugh. You know, all of us have, you know, pretty intense people focused jobs. But we don't talk work. You know, so having that way to have that outlet.
Jean, can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
So I know we have like some providers and agencies on here too. And even just to touch on that, like even asking like your team, what did you do for you this week? What did you do to disconnect? You know, how are you doing? Just like simple insight and, you know, just making sure that you're, you know, touching base with the people on your team to just make sure that they're also taking care of themselves too.
Yeah, because that is super important. I know when you walk into the office, the first thing you got people coming at you all the time, right? You know, so having that way to make sure that we are working with people who are in need constantly. You know, so having that way to make sure that you are taking care of your needs. I like that. Taking time to laugh at ourselves is important. Anybody here? Because sometimes people feel like why have we decided that taking care of ourselves is selfish? As human beings, why have we decided that that's selfish? You know? That we have to be on. Calvin says it's selfless. Somebody told me one time that kind of hit me hard is that you know the good feeling you get when you support other people? When you don't let people support you, that's being selfish. You are robbing them of that same good feeling that when you get when you help others. Cindy says the airplane mask situation, put on your own mask first. And it's hard because, you know, God, it's so amazing to have a job that feeds our soul like it does. You know, we all feel like we really are making a difference in the world and making a difference in people's lives. And we just need to be careful that that doesn't become the only thing that feeds us. You know, vegetables are really healthy, but you cannot live on vegetables alone. People think vegetarians are really healthy, but they're really not. People on those vegetarian diets, man, they are not healthy. They get lots of vitamins, but they don't get the proteins and all that kind of stuff that they need. For me, it's when I became a mother that shutting off became very difficult. Somebody else mentioned earlier too about sometimes struggling with being motherly with the people you serve. Understanding what your role is in the different situations is really important. And I love what Christy said about this is not something that is restricted to peers. Do you know the top 3 professions most at risk for suicide? Number 1 is the medical profession. Number 2 is police officers. More police officers die by their own hand than die in the line of duty. And the third one is veterinarians. The most common profession for suicide. And again, a lot of times it is because people don't think about people who need support. So self-care is huge. So what do you do to make that sense? I mean, you know, everybody's said boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. What does that look like for you? Kelly says, saying no. I don't have to say yes all the time. And I don't have to feel guilty about saying no. Anybody else? So Teresa said she took a codependent class. And Marcy said guilt is the hardest part. And I want to say, first of all, on the guilt thing, I want to say it's not wrong or bad to feel guilty. You know, I felt horrible about that woman that went to sleep in the stairwell. It's not wrong to feel that. That means you're a good human being. So again, why that struggle of just going with your gut is not always the best response. And then what was that other person said? Oh, so somebody says, have you found any caregiver support groups? How many of you have some sort of, somebody said they do the play cards with husband and friends. I think of that as a support group. How many of you have a support group that's something beyond just recovery? What is something you do for a support group? I consider our Sunday card game to be a support group. What is something you guys do for your support group? I like that. Board game family that gets together every other week. Nice. Church. A lot of people, church serves that purpose for them too. I saw a lot of things going through earlier about people who do, different kinds of crafting stuff. I might have missed the context of this, but I really like that we laugh until our stomach burns doing Spanish homework. I think that's huge, to find ways to laugh, to find joy, because, again, our jobs can be really tough. If we're not taking care of ourselves, there are 2 responses to that kind of stress, is that we can go to one extreme where we care about everything too much, or we can go to the opposite extreme where we care about nothing. If you don't find that balance, You're going to be susceptible to that burnout, that codependency, and the responsibility of it is 100% in your court. If your job is too stressful for you, find a different job. You know, if your supervisor is a jerk and you can't work with them, find a new job. I'm not saying that any of these decisions are going to be easy. Remember, ethics is not easy. So next up, we're going to do some scenarios. Let me see if I can get back over to there we go. All right, more than one way. I think instead of, ideally, if we were in person, I would break you guys into small groups to work on this, but let's try to do this as a big group. Here's what it is. We're going to discuss each of the following questions for each scenario and brainstorm 5 possible actions that could be taken. And then we will rank those answers. The best is number 1, the worst is number 5. Questions to consider. Is there a right or wrong choice? What are the possible consequences of each choice? Who could be affected by each choice? Would I feel guilty because of any of the choices? Would any of the choices embarrass me if others found out? Do I have an obligation or duty to make certain choices or report the situation? Why might someone else not agree with my choice? And if there are negative consequences for doing the right thing, how can I face them in a strong, positive way? So I do not have these scenarios on the PowerPoint. They are in the handouts, but let's take a look at the first one. Your agency announced a new hire. You know this person from outside the agency and know that it's a bad fit for the agency and know it will not work out. What are some options in this scenario? I'm going to try to take notes. What are some options?
Hello, I'm Diane. I would say for me, it would be like humble myself enough to know that I don't know everything and that to trust, like, you know what, maybe that person's changed. And so if I know, maybe I really don't know.
Right. So trust the choice. Okay. What else? Trust the choice. Give them a chance. Someone else may have more info. So Calvin said someone else may have more info. I'm going to tie that in with Kelly's. You could ask for feedback from someone that doesn't know the situation. Okay, I'm going to tie those two together. Is that good, Calvin? What else could you do? We need to come up with at least 5. And here's the reason is that, you know, in the training we talk about, is there any decision that has only one solution?
No.
But how many times have we said, I didn't have a choice? I had to do X. Mind my own business. I think that's trust the choice. If you're asked, be honest. Okay. I think there are at least 30 solutions to every problem. I like that. Wait and see what happens. Let the team know your concerns. Okay. So we have trust the choice. We have give the person a chance. We have ask others for feedback. If asked, be honest. Wait and see what happens, or let the team know your concerns. So which one do you think would be the worst choice of those 5? you want me to go through those again? We have trust the choice, give them a chance, ask others, if asked, be honest, wait and see what happens, and let the team know your concerns. Which of those would be the worst choice?
Wait and see.
Okay, so we'll call that one, we'll rank that one E. So what would be the second worst choice? We have trust the choice of the team, give the person a chance, ask others for feedback, if asked, be honest, or let the team know. Allison says, ask others. What does everybody else think? Everybody
Yeah.
good with, okay. So then the next one, we have trust the choice, give the person a chance, if asked, be honest, and or let the team know.
We vote, let the team know.
I see that. They all came up at once.
Yeah. Let the team know.
So that's the third option. Okay, so we're down to options 1 and 2. Trust the choice, give the person a chance, or if asked, be honest. Which one would you do for?
If asked, be honest.
Okay, so then for our first choice, we have trust the choice or give the person a chance.
Give the person a chance.
Okay, so here's the order we rank them in. The quote, best decision would be to give the person a chance, followed by if asked, be honest, followed by let the team know your concerns, then ask others for feedback, or E, wait and see what happens. Now, I'm guessing that whatever you do in this scenario, it's probably going to be a combination of those. But really thinking through in each situation. So if you decide to give this person a chance, let's look at those questions at the top. Is there a right or wrong choice in this situation? There's probably not necessarily a right or wrong choice. What are the possible consequences? You know, you could sabotage it for that individual and their job, you know, or you could sour the opinion of the supervisor to that individual. Who will be affected? All of the players. Would I feel guilty because any of the choices? Would you feel guilty if you gave the person a chance and it didn't work out? Maybe. Would you, but at the same time, would you feel guilty if you let the team know it had influenced their opinion of the person? Probably. Would any of the choices embarrass me if others found out? That doesn't necessarily help in this situation either, because, you know, if they knew, if the group knew I was worried about this person and I didn't say anything, that would embarrass me. But if this person was doing well and I brought it to the team's attention, that would embarrass me too. So that one's kind of tough. Do I have an obligation or duty to make a certain choice or to report the situation? Do you have an obligation to your agency to say to them that it might be a bad fit? Part of it is we're kind of in that situation. Yeah, somebody said it depends. Part of that is we're kind of in that situation of incomplete information. We don't know from this scenario what bad fit means. You know, so that makes it a little bit tough. Why might someone else not agree with my choice? I think it's important to think through why others may not agree with your choice. It doesn't necessarily mean your choice is wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, but it's always helpful to look at what the other side of the perspective is. Are there any negative consequences for doing the right thing? And how can I face them in a strong, positive way? There are often negative consequences for doing the right thing. Avoiding those negative consequences is never the right thing. Let's see, not unless you are on the hiring team, but then again, their past is their past. We all have a past. I'm glad someone gave me a chance. I know, and that's kind of the struggle here is that, you know, it would depend to me. What is some information we talked about? One of the problems in this scenario is incomplete information. What is some information you would need to make this decision? Am I on the team? Yes. Do I have a role in this? What else? Do I have authority? Facts. What are the facts of the situation? Some other things is that, you know, am I letting my emotions interfere? One way or the other. Somebody says, yeah, I had a peer support tell me she was drinking, and then an ethical challenge oftentimes is when people are receiving services from the agency where they work. And there was a situation here that a woman was receiving services, therapy services from the agency she also worked for. And the woman told the therapist that she was getting high and that she had gotten high with one of the people she serves. Talk about an ethical dilemma. The therapist has a responsibility to the confidentiality of the client, who's also a peer specialist. She also has an ethical responsibility to the person served by the agency that the peer specialist was getting high with. How do you decide which ethic is more important? That can be a challenge. I kind of like that. What is the purpose of sharing? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish with sharing this information? All right, let's look at the next scenario. Someone you serve is struggling financially. He approaches you and says that he needs toilet paper. You know that you could swipe some from the agency. What could you do? What are some things you could do? Ignore the need. So, okay, ignore. Whoops. Find an organization, find a resource. Buy some. Oh, for a minute there, Diane, I thought it said refer to local restaurants for swiping. Oh, do some day labor to make some money to buy it. Okay. Look for donations, resources. Now, nobody put on this list so far anyway, that they would swipe the toilet paper. But be honest, how many of you have swiped toilet paper in your time? That's being honest. That needs to go on this list. Even the bad choices need to go on this list. Because there was a place in your head when I read that scenario that immediately said, well, you just swipe the toilet paper. It doesn't necessarily mean when you look at, when we rank these, that it's the one that you pick, but it's being honest that it really is something that's on the list. So, all right, we have ignore the request, seek resources, buy some, help with day labor, get a donation, or swipe it. Which one do you think? Which one would you rate number 5? Holly says, maybe I need to keep TP in my closet. So swipe it's number 5. You know, and that's a great observation is that if you find yourself in ethical situations like this on a regular basis, is it might be a resource you need to have on hand. So number 4, we have ignore, find a resource, buy some, day labor, donate. Ignore, okay. So then for number 3, we have find a resource, buy some, day labor, donate. Cindy was really honest. She says, I went by too fast, but she said that to be honest, that she'd probably just give him some because there are so many bigger things to deal with. And again, a lot of times, thank you for that honesty. Because that's exactly what we're talking about, is that sometimes in the moment, it's easier to just give them a roll of toilet paper because we have so many other things to deal with. Is it going to be the end of the world? Are you going to get fired? Maybe, maybe not. You know, but again, and it may be that you can qualify that as just, but with the giving them a roll of toilet paper is give them the roll of toilet paper and then report it to your supervisor. You know, and it is understanding that a lot of times we make those ethical choices because it's just easiest in the moment and not think about what might be the bigger scenario. So we have for our top 2, we have find a resource, buy some, and donate. Which one of those are your 1 and 2? Yeah, Diane says no secrets, tell the boss. So it donates number 2, and what is number 1? Find a resource or buy some. Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of a tie between the 2 of those. We had a scenario at our center where we had a guy that had extremely large feet, and we had an employee that had large feet, and he came to me. He wanted to give this guy a pair of his shoes that he didn't wear anymore. And what we discussed with that is that it would alter the dynamics between him and the individual if he gave them to the individual. But he could find them in the donation stuff and give it to the individual. So basically, the employee donated them to the agency, and then the agency provided the shoes to the individual. Is again, you want to stress that even in this situation is that it is a dual relationship. And you know, yes, you help the person find their toilet paper this time, but what are they going to do next time? Again, making sure that we don't help people so much that we disable them. And in all honesty, I have given people toilet paper. Full disclosure. Yes, I did tell my supervisor. But understanding that you don't have to make those decisions in a vacuum. You don't have to make those decisions on your own. So number 3, scenario number 3 says, a case manager asks you to transport a person to an appointment. This is not a part of your job and not something that you can make a case note about. The case manager tells you to just talk to the person on the drive about something on the trip, and then you can document it as a case note. Would that be ethical or not? Would that be ethical or not? Yes, Danielle says, yes, it would be ethical to write a case note about that. Tell me about that. Where is Danielle?
Well, basically, you can take them with you as long as you're talking to them about their appointment and keeping up to speed on something else that they can help with or that you can help them with, and informing them of, we're doing this for the benefit and for, I guess, for the case, as opposed to just going out of your way to doing it for them.
Well, this is one of those loopholes that a lot of agencies fall into because, for example, usually Medicaid says you can't transport people. So as a workaround for that, oftentimes agencies will tell peer specialists, well, just talk to them on the drive and then you can bill for it.
But do we have to bill for it? I mean, does
Well,
it have to be a billable thing?
It depends on your agency. You know, if that is the way the agency draws down money to pay your salary, then yes. So you see the dilemma. At the same time, agencies are in a jam because Medicaid won't let you transport people. So how do you help, especially in rural areas, how do you help get people to appointments? So going through those, Kevin says, what if you do a clinical staffing note? But which one in that moment, you have a dual position. You're a chauffeur and you're doing clinical work. Which hat are you wearing?
Can you just clock it in as a meeting? Whether it be in a car or in the home, it's still a meeting.
Which one are you doing though? But it's a dual meeting.
Yes. But wouldn't it be considered an in-home meeting? Whether
No,
it be in a car
you're taking
or...
them to an appointment. Which one is your priority? Meeting with the individual or transporting them to the appointment?
I cross lines, I guess, because meeting with that person and taking them to appointment is still covering basis of what you're trying to do.
And I'm not saying that what you're doing is wrong. And I'm not saying that probably at least 80% of the people in this room have done the same thing and do the same thing. The question is it ethical to wear those two hats simultaneously?
I guess, again, depending upon the agency.
Well, because keep in mind, policies are different than ethics. Agency policy might say that you can do that. But you understand, again, and this is probably not going to change anybody's agency policy having this discussion. But the question is, you know, isn't that a dual role? And the issue is that at the same time, yes, we've accepted this dual role because it serves this other purpose.
Okay, I do see the ethics in it because you don't know whether that person has drugs on them or has something that could be detrimental for you.
That's irrelevant. That's
or
irrelevant. No, that part's irrelevant. That's covering your ass.
Okay.
That part's irrelevant. The relevant thing
No, I'm not
is,
really giving yours, but yeah, I don't see the ethical. I don't see it.
are you being a driver or are you being a peer specialist? Which one are you doing?
I'd say that's a dual role, like you say, both.
Is it ethical to have that dual relationship? Here's my other question with that. Is that would the clinician do that?
No.
So why is it left that the peer specialist should be able to do that?
Because that's a role that a peer specialist, I guess, would put in.
No, it's not a part of the job description. In fact, Medicaid specifically says that you cannot draw down Medicaid money for driving people places.
Danielle, don't worry. I struggle with this too, because when I was doing recovery work, a lot of great conversations would come from helping them get places. You know what I mean? So I get it.
that's the struggle. As you find out more information, you find out better ways to help them when you are actually transporting them. Like you do.
Yeah,
Personally, I do.
and again, one of those ways, why don't we go out for a walk with somebody and have that conversation? Well, not in North Dakota because it's too freaking cold or it's too freaking hot. But you see what I'm saying is about how we find ways. Yes, I do agree that a lot of times that you do get sometimes in better conversations with folks, but oh, we're sorry, we reached the destination. You got to go to your appointment. Sorry, we're done talking. Which is, it's understanding that is still a dual role and understanding how, and I'm not saying that we need to, that policies are going to change or that there's anything evil about any of this. It's just about understanding that it is a dual role and which one is your priority.
So maybe taking and scheduling the meeting time before and at the end of the meeting, just, I guess, leaving it off as a drop off.
Yeah.
With both the crossing line, because you're doing both. You're not really taking on both roles, but you're taking on the suggested role, the correct role, the actual role that you're supposed to be playing at the forefront.
And one of the things that's really sad about that sometimes is that sometimes that is the only time peer specialists are allotted to spend with people. And that's where it becomes an even bigger problem. Is
Or
that
like when they're together, like distraction free, the hustle and bustle, the pressure of that,
is that the only time they get to spend interacting with the individual is while they're transporting people. And again, knowing that transportation is such a huge issue in rural areas. I live in the capital city. Well, you Bismarck folks are in the capital city, but I live in the capital city, and so many people get medical referrals to specialists that are out of town. How do you get people to those appointments? There's not a way. The VA has a van that'll transport people to the VA, but outside of that, how am I going to get somebody to Grand Rapids to see a kidney doctor? So it's not that I'm saying that peers shouldn't, but maybe we need to focus on what that policy is around transportation, about whether peers can transport people, and whether the agency can draw down money for that. And at the same time, making sure that that's not the only time that peers get to interact with the people they serve. Because sometimes people say that that's all they get to do. And thank you, Danielle, for your advocating for that, because it is tough. Ethics.
Well, yeah. For me personally, I'm not a big, I can talk in certain groups and it's not an issue, but if you're going to get to the core of the issues, you're not going to get it in a large group. You're going to get it one-on-one in a vehicle. You're not going to get it in a situation like that. It's just,
yeah.
For me,
well, somebody put in the chat box that they're not allowed to transport. They're only allowed to meet with people at the office. I think that's a little weird too, is that we make people have to come to us. You know? But why not go sit at the park and have that conversation?
I guess my viewpoint on a peer support would be your peers, someone that you can interact in these normal, unnormal circumstances without it being crossing the line. That's in my opinion of a peer support.
But at the same time, understanding when you're doing that dual role, you're helping that individual with the transport, but you're also being a benefit to the agency.
Yeah.
Why aren't they hiring people to do those transports, whose sole job it is to do those transports? Or why aren't the clinicians doing it? If it was a job that everybody did, if the clinicians met with folks in the car while they were given a ride, that might be a little different. But
I think it's an added benefit to an agency to have someone like that in that kind of a position because they are
Absolutely.
hearing different things. It is definitely a
Absolutely.
benefit.
Absolutely. So hire people to be drivers.
Okay.
And I know they'll tell you we don't have the funding to do that. And you know,
Yeah.
again, this is a situation that's set up because it's easier for everybody, but does it make it right? That's why ethics are so hard. That's why ethics are so hard. You know, and somebody put in the chat is that most of the time clinicians and their work schedule is so busy, a lot of times they do pawn off things like this to the peer specialist. And recognizing that that's not necessarily our job. You know, and yes, Daniel, it feels icky. Yes.
I don't know. I'm one of those go for it, ask questions later, apologize if you have to, you know, so that's, yeah.
So you said in your, and if I'm calling you out on it, feel free to turn me down, but do you have other opportunities to meet with and talk to the people you see other than transports? Or is that your primary opportunity to talk to people?
That was mine for a long time. It really was. That was something I chose. It wasn't some, you know, I mean, I was in my deep addiction, in my own, you know, it wasn't like something I was deep into addiction as well, but it's something I chose to do because it helped me know I was helping those people that, because they don't have cars, they did, you know, and I did. It's something that I could offer that I knew I could do without asking for anything in return, but it could benefit all involved to grow from, I guess. So for me, like I said, I just go for it, ask questions later, apologize if I have to, just because in how I went through all those experiences, those things benefited me more. I mean, hindsight, of course, when you're in it, you don't really look at it that way, but hindsight, that's what benefited me more and most are those little tiny small things.
Well, and again, I'm not saying that, again, most of our ethical violations are not out of evil.
Yeah.
You know, they are out of it's convenient in the moment. Why aren't we Ubering people to that appointment and then scheduling time for you to have some one-on-one with that person at the park or whatever?
I don't know. It's weird, but for me personally, I'm going to open up and talk in a car. I don't like silence. I don't like quiet. And, so yeah, for personally me, it's giving rides, driving them somewhere, taking them, and it just kind of opens a door for communication. It opens that door easily.
Daniel, I'm really glad that you're game for this conversation because I'm going to push you again. So, so basically you're saying that, okay, if you want transportation to this doctor's appointment, then you have to talk to me. And that's what you have to pay for this ride.
No, that's the thing is it's to their discretion. It's a way of giving them comfort to want to or not want to. It's giving them that comfort. I guess, yeah. I know. I'm a mother. I'm a mom. Yeah, that's. I get my kids to talk a lot. Hey, let's get them in the car. So yeah, no. I guess.
So yeah, and again, why these ethical conversations, and a lot of times how we have policies like this, and we don't necessarily think about what is the bigger picture. Stephanie says paying for a ride is not against the ethics, not if it's done by the agency, not if it's part of the agency's policy. Our local provider, they give bus tokens to people to get to and from appointments. And the other thing with that, and again, it's a bigger challenge in rural areas, it's a bigger challenge in areas that don't have transportation, is that a lot of times we are also giving people rides that we don't necessarily need to give them rides to. Because, you know, if I'm giving you a ride to the doctor's appointment today, yes, I'm helping you out, but what if you want to go see a friend on Saturday? You know,
Those
so,
boundaries.
yep. So, you know, yeah, we decide that's a boundary when it's convenient for us to give you transportation. But it's not a boundary when, you see what I'm saying? Mhm. So thank you for that, Danielle, and now we've messed up your head for the rest of the day.
No, you're great. We're good.
But yeah, you know, again, exactly why, you know, sometimes, you know, we do that slippery slope of ethics is that we can justify it, we can make sense of it, and, you know, and not necessarily think there could be consequences. And if we deny the potential consequences, that's when those consequences are most dangerous. Is that if we deny the potential consequences. Stephanie says, I hate it when I'm only allowed to meet people in the community. You know, yeah, sometimes, you know, again, if we can leave it up to the individual is what works for that individual. Heather, did you have some input to provide?
I just wanted to say, like, just a reminder that this is specific to that Medicaid scenario. Because we do, many of the programs that our peers work in are very flexible, designed very rightfully that way. And so we don't have those limitations. And so, but yeah, it was very like Medicaid specific. So I just wanted to make sure I gave that reminder so that we don't get a lot of questions around that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. All right, let's go over to scenario 4. Someone you serve wants you to help them contact their payee for money. You know that they need that money to pay off their dealer. What are your options? Elliot says, I'm busy. So tell them you're busy. Contact the payee. It's none of my business what it's for. Help the person contact them themselves. Get them a phone and let them contact their payee. All right, what else we got? Just leave it alone. Talk to the person about the situation. Do you know this or know this? I like that. Share your story. Report it to the police. Oh, I didn't realize it was their dealer. So, all right. Don't be an enabler. All right. So here is what we have. Tell the person that you're busy. Contact payee. Decide it's none of your business what they need the money for. Help them contact them themselves. Talk to them about their money issues. Share your story or contact the police. Which do you think is going to be the worst possible way to handle this situation?
Contact the police.
Contact the police? Okay. So we have, tell them you're busy, contact the payee, none of my business, help them do it themselves, talk about the money situation, share your story, what would be the next worst way to handle it?
Tell them I'm busy.
Okay. Let's see. We have contact payee, none of my business, help them do it themselves, talk about money, share your story. What would be about the middle of the road for that one?
None of my business.
Okay. So we're to the top two. So the top two options for you to contact payee, help them do it themselves, talk to them about money, share your story. Help them contact is number two. So the number one option we have, oh wait. The number one option is contact the payee for them, talk to them about the money situation, share your story.
Share my story.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that when you're sharing your story, you're probably going to include a little bit about, situations where you've had to deal with the money situation. So I think probably share your story and talk to them about the financial kind of tie in together. So then the other thing about this scenario is it our responsibility when people make bad choices? Because I have heard people in this little scenario or similar scenarios to say, I'm not going to help them get a hold of their payee. They got themselves into the situation. And that is equally as unethical a way to handle the situation as just doing it for them. Understanding that at the same time that sometimes it is really frustrating when you are working with someone and they continue to make, quote, bad choices. It's not our job to rescue them from their bad choices. It's also not our responsibility to make them make, quote, good choices. They have to maintain autonomy over their own life, as hard as that is at times. Absolutely. Absolutely. You cannot take that from them. Oftentimes, I think that in all honesty, you guys picked talk to them about the financial situation and share your story. I think you also want to be careful that you don't shift into that lecturing mommy mode. Is that, again, your job is to help them think through their choices and their responsibility for those choices, not to lecture them. They know they're in a stupid situation. They don't need to hear that from you. That is not going to help them work through the situation. Been there, done that, mommy mode. Thank you for that, Diane, because I think that a lot of times we do that mommy mode, or the rescuer role, or the lecturer role, and understanding that that's not our job. If y'all would just do things the way I tell you to do them, the world would be a perfect place, right? The problem is that we all think that way. And that creates a lot of conflict, and understanding that that's not our role when we're working with folks. Share my mistakes and how I classify my experiences and give them suggestions and help them know that they have a choice. I think that, even more so than giving them suggestions is helping them think through their options. Because, when you help them come up with answers to their own situations, they will surprise you. They will surprise you at the things that Cindy said, helping them think. is that they will surprise you about the solutions that they can come up with. They just need support to articulate that and follow through on that. That's what they need from you as the peer specialist, is not the solutions, but to help them process and get motivated to their own solutions. Cool, good job. Let's see, someone you are working with, next scenario, sorry, someone you are working with is applying for a full-time job. You worry that it might be too much for the person at this time. I think a lot of times we've been in situations where we know people have wanted to venture out onto something, whatever it is. In this case, it's a full-time job that you think they may not be prepared for. What are some things? Elliot says, do not transport them to their dealer. Well, if we have a conversation and we can do a progress note on it, why not? Sorry. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So back to the scenario. Someone you're working with is wanting to jump out on and venture into something you're not sure that they're fully prepared for. It says support their decision with positive affirmations. Discuss those challenges. So you think I can't do it? Calvin, you think I can't do it? Is that why we want to discuss these challenges? Supporting their decision. You guys are typing too fast. Find out how they're feeling about it. Pros and cons. Is the money good? Yeah, you know, they talk about, oh, it might be too stressful for you to get a full-time job. Is anybody aware of how stressful it is to live in poverty? All right, so here's what I got. I've got discuss the potential challenges, support their choice, ask them how they feel, pros and cons, ask them if they qualify. And Kevin also added there, no amount of money is worth putting your recovery on the back burner. I think a good question with that for the person is that, are they going to be able to balance this new responsibility with their recovery? I'm putting that on the list. All right, so we have discuss the challenges, support their choice, talk about how they feel, do a pros and cons list, ask them if they qualify, talk to them about balance with recovery. Which one is the worst choice? Ask if they qualify. Okay. So then we have discuss challenges, support choice, talk about how they feel, weigh the pros and cons, and talk about how it's going to balance with recovery. What's our next worst? Pros and cons is the next worst. Okay. We have discuss the potential challenges, support their choice, ask them how they feel, or talk to them about how this is going to balance with their recovery. Discuss challenges. You want number 3. Okay. So yeah, Kevin says is that also weighing that, it says if you don't, I missed it a little bit, but Kevin talked about the challenge of okay, now that I got this job with this money, is it going to jeopardize my recovery because now I'm going to have more money to use? So that leads us down to support their choice, talk with them how they feel, talk to them about how they're going to balance this with their recovery. Which one do you want for number 2? Support them with their choice for number 2. And then what would you do for number 1? The balance with recovery. I think that's a really good choice, because a couple of reasons. One, that balance with recovery, it really ticks off all those other ones. You know, it really ticks off that discussing challenges, supporting choice. You're not telling them that you don't believe in them. It really does tick off all of those boxes. Now, I'm guessing that in the moment, your emotional reaction, depending on the situation, is going to be, because it says in here that you worry it may be too much for them. Your emotional reaction in the moment is to discuss the challenges. You know, but the odds are is that if there's nothing worse for your self-esteem than looking for a job. Never do you face so much rejection in your life. So starting off with discussing the potential challenges might be discouraging to me. But it's a great focus on our job as peers, that our job is to do that. Talk to them about how this is going to balance with their recovery. So absolutely staying in our lane about what is our responsibility as peers is to talk to them about how they feel they're going to be able to balance this with their recovery. All righty, we're on scenario number 6. Clinician at your agency is very rude and disrespectful to the clients. What are your options? Stand up for the clients. What do you think that means? Help me dig a little deeper on what does stand up mean? Talk to supervisor. Oh, ask the person if they want you to talk to the person. Nice. Take the person to lunch. Apologize, help them fill out a complaint form. Advocate for the person. Talk to the coworker. I'm going to put this on the list. Make excuses for the person who's being rude. All right. Let's see. I'm going to. All right, here's what I got. I have confront the individual who's being rude. Talk to your supervisor. Ask the person you're with if they would like you to address this situation. Take the rude person to lunch. Help the person file a complaint. Oh, apologize, sorry, can't even read my writing. Apologize for the person's behavior and help the person write a complaint. Advocate for the individual. Talk to that coworker. Make excuses for the situation. So which one? The worst result would be make excuse for the situation. Okay. The next worst situation, we have confront the individual, talk to your supervisor, ask the person if they would like you to talk to the person, take them to lunch, help the individual file a complaint, or talk to that coworker, which would be the second worst. Let's see. where did I put that one? Apologize and do the complaint would be number 4. It sounds like that, or lunch sounds like number 4. So now we're down to our top 2. Do we confront the individual, talk to the supervisor, ask the individual if they would like you to address the situation, or talk to the coworker? Which one's number 1? Which one's number 2? We have confront the coworker and talk to the coworker. What's the difference? And we also have, that's a really good one, is that, and there's no, because somebody also added in there, ask the individual if they would like you to talk to the person. And there is no reason in a situation like this that there cannot be 3 solutions. Now if I asked the person, do you want me to address that situation, that person was rude to you? What if they say no? And you still feel like it's the issue that should be addressed? Because oftentimes that'll happen. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've worked with individuals that were living in horrible group home situations. And you talk to them about whether they'd like to file a complaint about their group home situation, and they say no, because they're afraid of consequences. There was an individual that was in a group home, and I don't know what the deal was, but they were making the guy sleep on a mattress in the driveway. And I can't tell you, how much it took to talk to him about finding a different place to live or filing a complaint against that agency. He was sleeping on a mattress in the driveway. So then the question is, okay, if you ask that individual, what do you do if they say no? In this situation, we continued to work with the guy and continued to work with guy. And, and finally he was willing to file a complaint and get out. But he was afraid that he'd been in some really other bad situations, and he was actually afraid he was going to end up someplace worse. But I like what Diane put in here, is that I would still include the individual. I think that that's really important, and there's a difference between, we said, apologize for the individual and file a complaint. There's a difference between saying, I'm sorry Christy treated you that way, and apologizing for Christy is different than I'm sorry for what you experienced. I'm sorry you had to experience that. Then you're giving validity to the experience the person had, but not saying, you're sorry for what the coworker did. And I think that's taking responsibility too. All righty. How about if we take another quick break, and then we have a few more things before we are done for the day, and then we'll do some questions too. How does that sound? Okay. 11:25. Is that right?
Sure. So we will see you guys back in 6 minutes. And yeah.
Oh, wait. Oh, 6. Okay. Well, I was going to do 15 minutes. Let's do 15 minutes. See, I can't do the math.
I'm like looking at the clock like, that's kind of random, but I'll run with it.
Okay. 11:35. That's what I was looking for. 11:35. I changed the hour and forgot to do the minutes.
Hey, it happens.
Math is not my strong. Ethics is my strong point, not math. See you guys in a minute. Thanks, guys. All right, a couple more things to wrap up before we get out of here is, what are some things you can do to help you make good ethical decisions? It says there, it helps to have some questions ready in your mind when you need to know how to decide to do certain thing or not. Here are a few questions you can ask yourself. Number one, would you be embarrassed to tell your grandmother what you'd done? If the answer is yes, then don't do it. However, I know some of you have evil grandmas. If that describes you, here are more. Number two, would you be satisfied with the explanation you'd give to a reporter if you ended up being on TV? Remember, reporters have an annoying habit of asking the same question over and over again until they make you cry or threaten to hurt them. It is that kind of person you want to be. And last, but certainly not least, does your company have policies against doing the thing you're thinking of doing? If the answer is yes, then don't do it. Because as you can see, your company is a lot like your grandma. Again, know the policies of your agency. That's going to be really important to help guide you. Do have folks in your life that can not just give you the answer you want to hear, but really help you think through all of those moving parts when making ethical decisions. You know, and as we've seen today, even making good decisions certainly doesn't make it easy. Even making a good decision doesn't always make it ethical. So understanding those challenges and continue. You know, we did that exercise. Think of 5 possible solutions to the situation. Take time to do that. Don't feel like you have to make a snap decision in the moment. So I wanted to end with any time, opportunity for questions, anything you guys got out of today. I hope that this is not the only opportunity you guys have to talk and think about ethics, because it really is something that needs to be an ongoing process. And, you know, again, not just because we're peers. A friend of mine is the executive director of the National Social Workers Association for Michigan. And most of what she does is field calls about ethics, because it's something you always need to be thinking about. Elliot says, we always need to make sure that we're setting the example. Kevin has a question about transporting clients to meetings that you are also attending. This has come up a lot in the trainings as well, is that I think it's a little difficult. I think it is a challenge in, especially in rural areas where there's not a lot of meeting opportunities. But I really worry about how forthcoming that individual can be in the meeting if their peer specialist is also there. I worry about how forthcoming the peer specialist can be. And I know a lot of times people will say, you know, well, you know, there's confidentiality at a 12-step group and stuff like that. But if you find out at a 12-step meeting that somebody you serve is using and they're not telling their clinician, you're not going to be able to hang your hat on that. Well, I found out about it. It was confidentiality. Nothing leaves this room. You're not going to be able to hang your hat on that. What I try to suggest to folks is going with the person to the first meeting to help them feel comfortable is very helpful. I think it's very important for all of you to have your own peer support network, your own home group, if it's a 12-step group. I know some folks have had to transition to doing online 12-step groups. I think things like that can be very helpful so that you don't have to worry about that dual role. That, you know, are you 12-step with this person or are you peer support with this person? You know, let somebody else play that role in their life. And I know, especially if it's been your home group for years, especially if it's the home group that got you sober, but you're in a different place than that person is. You probably have other options that that person does not.
And Kevin, Sorry,
Okay.
Jean. If you want to email me so we can chat about that further, feel free. I was personally in a situation like that. I mean, as you know, I certify a lot of peers, but I am too also in my own recovery program. And I was going to a meeting that I loved. And, I had to transition to more of an online setting. And so I get it. Like I've been there and it's just kind of awkward, but you always keep the person you're serving in mind, but also don't forget about yourself too and what you're comfortable with, it's important.
Yeah, because the flip side of it is I've seen people decide to stop going to meetings because the people they serve go, well, that's not good either. You need to be doing whatever you need to do to take care of your recovery as well. It's just that you are in a place where you have the ability to find some different options that you didn't always have. I missed a lot of the questions that went by. Jeremy says, I'm sensing a trend. Avoid the dual role. That is such a brilliant observation. And there are so many ways that you can fall into that dual role. It's not your job to be the therapist. Leave that to the therapist. It's not your job to be the sponsor. Leave that to the sponsor. It's not your job to be the bank. Leave that to the bank. It's not your job to be Uber. Leave that to Uber. Figuring out what it is so that you don't have that dual role. It's a great observation.
In that sense of like that dual role, sorry guys, I've had too much coffee this morning. It can happen so fast, right? Like for an example, going back to that situation about being in the same meeting of like, peers that you're serving or certifying or whatever, it happens like if you're in there for your own recovery, right? And then all of a sudden you see certain people that in like the peer world or whatever, it's like I caught myself. I had to be really aware of this, transitioning from working on my recovery and being there for myself to kind of then doing that mentorship role, right? So I totally agree with what Jean said. Just try to, avoid that. And like I said, always keep not just the person you're serving in mind, but yourself too.
Kevin says, so what if a client asks you to be their sponsor? That's a great, and a lot of times people will, because they've built that relationship with you, that trust relationship with you, they will think of you as their go-to person. What I try to talk to people about is that I want you to have as many possible supports in your life. So how about I stay in the role of your peer specialist and I help you find somebody that'll fit for you for a sponsor. You want people to have as many people in their life as possible to support them. And, so only having one person is a disservice that, explain to them. I know we've built a great trust relationship and I'll be able to help you work it out with your sponsor and I'll help you find a sponsor. But understand that my role is different. Let's see, any other questions in there that I missed? They came up really fast. Elliot said, yeah, if you're in the same meeting as someone, you can pass, but at the same time, are you not honoring your recovery if you're passing all the time? You guys are in a very unique role in that you are kind of living between two worlds, is that you're living between the role of a provider and the role of the recipient of services. That's going to make our ethics a little more tricky to negotiate. And again, why you want to make sure you're thinking through these scenarios. Don't feel like you have to react. Find a list of people that, whose opinion you can trust to be able to bounce things off of. And again, they don't even have to be people you like. I have somebody on my list who I really cannot stand this person. They really annoy me, but I always know that I can go to them and they will give me their honest perspective. Don't just surround yourself with people that will agree with you. Tara said, can you talk a little more about having too rigid of boundaries and how that is unethical? The example I talked about earlier about, I'm not going to do something for somebody that they can do for themselves. Well, that's really good. That's a really good boundary to have. The problem is that sometimes when you assume, going back to the person that wants you to fill out a form for them, if you're assuming that that's the problem and not that they might have some other barrier going on. So that you can have too rigid of boundaries that you aren't supporting that person. Gosh, there's a great thing if you do Google some compassion versus empathy. There's some really good stuff out there on that can be really helpful thinking about what the difference is. And again, how not to get caught up in that. Somebody says, let's say that if someone calls and says, if you do not do X, whatever X is, I will kill myself. How do you ethically handle that? First of all, anybody that's threatening me, if you don't do this, I'll do that. I'm not responsible for your choices. That is your choice. Whether it's Allison says welfare check. Do understand that if you put me in that position where you are threatening to kill yourself, I do have a responsibility to report that. Now, if you would like me to support you in figuring out how to get to X, I can help you with that. But my job is not to be your Uber driver. And at the same time is that I can't respond to being threatened. Yeah, make sure that you let folks know what, again, I like to say that if somebody says, even if it's nothing, can I tell you a secret? As long as it's not danger to self or others, I can keep a secret. And with that is that that's not quite true, because there probably are some other things that you might have to report on. If somebody's using, your agency might require you to report that. Is the other thing with that is that, to tell that person, since I have this knowledge, I have a responsibility to report it. Now we can go in together and talk to your case manager or the powers that be about this, but I have a responsibility. So informing them ahead of time, I think, is important. Yeah, and if you think about manipulation, that's another one that's really I really enjoy working with manipulative people because they can find some amazingly creative ways to get their needs met. And if I can manipulate you into giving me a ride to somewhere I want to go, I win. It doesn't mean they're evil. They're just trying to get their needs met in the only way they know how. And, just like any of our other learned dysfunctional behavior, that's all it is, so that you do not have to react to that manipulation. It's just understand the person is trying to get their needs met in the only way they know how. Yeah, Christy put in survival. That's all it is. You don't have to have an emotional reaction to that. Anybody else, any thoughts or questions before we wrap up for the day? This has been a really, really fun conversation. Thank you guys very much. I miss you all. I do wish I was there, even though it's cold. I appreciate all the passion and effort you guys are putting in as peers. You are changing the world, man. You are changing the world. And, your willingness to be here and find out more about how do we make ethical decisions is really important to that process. So thank you guys very much.
Jean, thank you, because you are an absolute gem, and I'm sure I can say that on behalf of everybody that is on this training and everybody that's in the training. You guys are fabulous. Like in some way, shape, or form, you guys are changing, whether you're changing our community, right? Like whether you're a peer support specialist, whether you want to hire them, whether you're a person supporting other people or a loved one or somebody that's experienced loss, like you guys with your experience have so much potential, and it is beautiful. And to see you guys interact the way that you do, it is just it just gets me all in my feelers. You guys are amazing. So with that said, I am going to put 3 things in the chat box right now, and I'll stay logged on so you guys can, click on them and everything. So the first one is going to be the survey attendance verification. So you're going to want to copy this link into your web browser, enter your information, and then give me about a week to make all the the attendance certificates, and I'll get those to you guys. It'll have your CEU information on it. If you're setting that stuff aside to recertify as a peer support specialist, again, just hold on to it. That'll go into your application to recertify. And then I'm also putting in my email address and a link for our upcoming trainings. In December, we're going to be hosting another training that is more for like the supervision of peer supports, but then also like, what does it look like bringing peers into your agency? What does it look like having a peer support specialist in a clinical setting? We want to be able to like answer all of those questions people wonder and just kind of spread some education on what that dynamic looks like. So I am going to, drum roll, I am going to go ahead and there you go, guys. There is your information. And again, there's my email address in there too. Shoot me an email if you ever, want to talk or you need some more information. Carlotta said, great training. Thank you for joining, everybody. You guys are amazing. So keep in touch.